Introduction. The documentary Zeitgeist made waves upon the Christian community when it declared that Jesus was but another version of a pagan god. This video is not Zeitgeist. The goal of this video is to show the secret origins of Christianity, and our intention is not to discredit Jesus. Let me say it right away, I do believe Jesus could have existed. However, I do not agree with King James Bible thumpers. Jesus is not the answer for everything, and you can't just constantly say,
"He's an occultist,"
to every author with a different perspective. The occult isn't, quote, bad. Most of the people who think this way are part of a conditioned way of thinking. Don't get me wrong, I understand the dangers of magic and the powers of the subconscious mind. I just don't think that's a good excuse. We can't just keep hiding from our shadows saying magic is evil, when most of you have no idea what it even is. Modern Christianity is making a large percentage of the population compliant and docile. Some would scoff and take offense, but humanity can no longer take the suppression of the occult with such ignorance. I have to say this because this type of thinking is a product of laziness. The modern Christian rejects the idea of any other god without first considering them, because even considering them could result in punishment by God, according to the King James Version. Yet, we have this quote here.
"He that answereth a matter before he heareth it, it is folly and shame unto him." Proverbs chapter 18, verse 13.
And yet, many have openly admitted that they will only read the King James Bible, while telling all others of differing faiths that they simply are wrong. To dismiss the points in this presentation just because I cite someone like Manly P. Hall? That's unfair. Let me just address the issue here. I realize that Christian viewers will consider this content Luciferian, occult, or satanic. To a Christian, those three words are synonymous. It's clear that this is due to a lack of understanding of semantics, and not understanding something causes people to react out of fear. Okay, Manly P. Hall was a Freemason. Big deal. So was Isaac Newton, Mozart, Ben Franklin, Louis Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, Harry Houdini, Booker T. Washington, and John Wayne. It's not that complicated to go become a Freemason. Honestly, I think it's overhyped. It's even possible that the organization's popularity was inflated to gather and chaperone the average men who show signs of deep curiosity. Okay, can we just consider Manly P. Hall in a general sense for a second? Let's just forget about his ideas on society and the idea of one world. Let's just say that's all true. Does that take away from the content that he wrote about? Sure, you could say there's an agenda, but here is my honest opinion. Knowledge is knowledge. Wisdom is wisdom. If you quiet your mind and allow yourself to absorb information, subconsciously you will take from it what you need. Manly P. Hall was a wise man whether you realize it or not, and anyone who has studied his work knows this without question. It comes from a complete misunderstanding of the occult. I mentioned astrotheology, and somehow people assumed that I was trying to discredit the Bible.
Hear this, O Job, stop and consider the wondrous works of God. Can you bind the chains of the Pleiades, or loose the cords of Orion? Can you lead forth the Mazzaroth in their season, or can you guide the bear with its children?
God makes the zodiac move. He's telling Job consider these great works, one of them being the secret of astrotheology.
Let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and seasons, and for days and years.
The confusion lies in that astrotheology is technically the religion of the stars, or the worship of the stars. This is where it can become blasphemous to state that this is the origins of Christianity. But just give me a moment. The stellar cults were not the first religions. The first religions were nature-based religions, which were in sync with God and the earth. The zodiac is a gift given by God to be used as a calendar for our world, and for also mapping our minds. The ancients knew this. It wasn't until later in history that man figured out that he could worship individual bodies and gain power from it. This is where the problem lies. We have cults of Saturn, Jupiter, the moon, and many more, all worshiping everything but the intelligence that is the invisible creator. Just because certain groups misuse this knowledge doesn't mean that it's originally evil. We need to know about this information, and people are being lazy and think that the only book they need is the King James Bible. Well, I think we all need to become philosophers in a way. We all need to think. And if you want to know my honest opinion, the authorized version of the Bible teaches the opposite of that. It is blatantly mental mind programming that gives you a certain esoteric truth, which sets this mysterious overtone to the whole experience of reading the Bible. Once you're in that state, that's it. You're in a trance. Words are powerful. These words of the Bible connect directly with the imagination. The imagination is like a projector that projects the words into moving pictures onto the stage that sits within the depths of the human mind. This can be a very spiritual experience for the reader, as this book is claiming to have what they've been searching for, consciously or unconsciously. Something to tell them what to do in life and why they should do it. The reason usually being, you must follow or face the wrath of the external being known as God. Ironically, there are hundreds of different denominations, which undoubtedly all have their own individual perspective on how to live. This seems to be the basis of many age-old conflicts, despite the fact that no single religious doctrine successfully delivers all the answers. Now, there must be some grains of truth in the Bible. This is what I say. The Bible is based on esoteric wisdom. Jesus and everything he stands for is positive and wise, no denying that, and I also am not denying that he is based on a real figure. Was Jesus his name? That's up for debate. Overall, the Bible is an incredible outlook on history. However, the way that it is presented is completely distorted. The whole idea that just because you believe in Jesus, that you are in favor of God, or that you have been given grace, is BS. And if that offends you, you're the problem. You can't just be given a story and a name and all of a sudden now God favors you to other people who do not believe in the same thing. What kind of distorted belief system is that? The whole idea that we need to be forgiven for our sins is messed up. We were kicked out of the Garden of Eden because of curiosity? Sure, you can say Satan or the snake, but here's the honest truth. The snake didn't lie. Oh my God.
He's an occultist.
Seriously? Okay, look, sure, this is Luciferianism. That does not mean Satanism, and most of you are completely confused to the true meaning. The Gnostic texts say that this snake was Sophia, manifesting as wisdom in order to bring awareness to the beings living in this realm of nescience. We pride ourselves for living in houses, watching television, making money, or careers, but all this comes from the sciences that were given to us by the fallen ones, supposedly. We live in a world where by practicing knowledge or by the pursuit of your ego in any way, you are sinning. That is what the material world is. Most people don't even realize that the idea that God can be jealous or that he argues with his disciples is just ridiculous. It is just blatantly obvious that these are not the writings straight from the inspiration of God. This text is mystical, secretive, well-designed, and most of all, based on esoteric wisdom. That's the problem most KJV bumpers are not aware of, that many scriptures do not make it into the Bible. Yeah, I've heard the arguments for why the Gnostic text did not make it into the Bible, but the thing is, the King James Bible and modern Christians translate the text literally, whereas the Gnostic text, or the Foundations of Christianity, translated the text allegorically. The reason they were left out is because of the knowledge they contain, not because the Gnostic texts were from unofficial sources. I have a Bible in my room. I study it from time to time. For me, it's only one of many books I look to for wisdom. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure that there are many Christians out there reading more than just the Bible, but I simply do not agree with the whole King James only philosophy, or the hundreds of other denominations of Christianity, all focusing on one detail or interpretation and distorting it to their own perspective. This can't be the way. Approximately 33%, of the world as we know it is Christian. If Christianity is the answer and a third of our population follow this Jesus Christ, then why do we have such high levels of depression and violence? Why is there a general lack of awareness, willingness, passion, and drive? It's obvious that, quote, turning to Jesus is most of the time a cookie-cutter way for people to bandage up their problems as opposed to learning and growing from them. There's nothing wrong with the idea of Christianity, but there is an issue of what it's become. We have to stop mental laziness. It's time to stop the suppression of magic and this whole idea of the devil and Satanism. It's a complete lack of knowledge of the psyche. That is our real problem. We don't actually understand ourselves. We started running before learning how to walk.
Examine yourself and understand who you are. Whosoever does not know self does not know anything. But whoever knows self has acquired the knowledge of the universe. Jesus, Book of Thomas, from the Gnostic Gospels. Those who know and realize the self are forever free. Katha Upanishad.
Christianity and paganism. It all begins with the Druids. According to Wikipedia, quote, a Druid was a member of the high-ranking professional class in ancient Celtic cultures. Perhaps best remembered as religious leaders, they were also legal authorities, adjudicators, lore keepers, medical professionals, and political advisors. The knowledge of the Druids has been suppressed in modern times. Find out for yourself. Go to your church and ask your reverend about the Druids. Oh, those savages? They practice ritual sacrifice, is a common answer. Quote, Dr. Smith thinks that Druids never offered any human or even animal sacrifice. Dr. Smith says that in the Gaelic language, customs, or traditions, there is not a hint allusive to the sacrifice of any living being, end quote. Quote, the Roman Church and State held the idea that all power should be centralized. All religious institutions which conflicted with this objective were to be destroyed. For this very reason, the mystery teachings, the Druids, were to be suppressed. The study and preparation necessary for those who were selected for initiation into the higher mysteries were such as to develop a highly philosophic and spiritual state of mind, a mind that did not comport with the object which the church rulers had in view. End quote. In Donnelly's Atlantis, in their great missionary pilgrimage, the Druids, they circled the globe in order to give religion and knowledge of God to the different races of mankind. They also established priesthoods and gave alphabets to the races who were unenlightened in such matters up to that time. Ireland is the country in which the arts and sciences were first discovered and developed. To this country the Greeks apply the term ogia, a term which was never given but to the very ancient, and it is from the Irish, ancient Druids, that the Greeks trace their descent. The Druids are the ancient Aryan priests, the first shamans, the preservers of the sciences of old, who inhabited the ancient lands of Ireland. What we are told is the Celts originate in the east. This is false. The Druids come from the north, or beyond the north wind, Hyperborea. We will learn more about the Druids as we go along, but I would encourage anyone resistant to keep this in mind. Is it true that the Druids are in some way connected with Christianity? Let's keep it simple, starting with Stonehenge.
The Druids now, while arms are heard no more, old mysteries and horrid rites restore, a tribe whose singular religion love, and haunt the lonely coverts of the grove. To these and all of mankind alone, the gods are sure revealed or sure unknown. If dying mortals' dooms they sing all right, no ghosts descend to hell in dreadful night, no parting souls to grisly Pluto go, nor seek the dreary silent shades below, but forth they fly, immortal in their kind, and other bodies in new worlds they find. Thus the life forever runs its endless race, and like a line, death but divides the space. A stop which can but for a moment last, a point between the future and the past. Thrice happy they between the northern skies, who that worst fate, the fear of death, despise. Hence they no cares for this frail being feel, but rush undaunted on the pointed steel, provoke approaching fate, and bravely scorn to spare that life which must so soon return. Rose Lucan.
Most of us know about Stonehenge, right? If you don't know who the Druids are, they are the creators of Stonehenge. Most new to the subject already know this, they just need to remember. Let's think about Stonehenge for a moment, and then continue more with my presentation on the Druids. The ruins called Stonehenge is an assemblage of upright and prostrate stones on Salisbury Plain, England, and is generally supposed to be the remains of an ancient Druidic temple. I'm going to be interpreting material from academic and mythological sources. If you strictly follow one piece of work, you will never see the bigger picture. I'm about to say some things that are really far away from the mainstream perspective. For anyone new, I talk about many of these topics on my channel. We have two things going on. We have the depictions of Stonehenge being built in a very primitive way by some early proto-Celts. Then we have this concept that Stonehenge was created by the Druids. After my research and understanding of Tartaria, I've come to the following conclusions. The subject of the Druids has become quite confusing. We know the source of the Druidism to come from Ireland. However, most of what we accept into academic circles today are what the later Greek historians wrote about. I see this as propaganda after the reset. The whole idea that Druids were primitive, delusional madmen who practiced sacrifice became the administered narrative.
During the 20th century, Stonehenge began to revive as a place of religious significance, this time by adherents of neo-paganism and New Age beliefs, particularly the Neo-Druids. The historian Ronald Hutton would later remark that it was great and a potentially uncomfortable irony that modern Druids had arrived at Stonehenge just as archaeologists were evicting the ancient Druids from it. The first such neo-Druidic group to make use of this megalithic monument was the Ancient Order of Druids, who performed a mass initiation ceremony there in August 1905, in which they admitted 259 new members into their organization. This assembly was largely ridiculed in the press, who mocked the fact that neo-Druids were dressed up in costumes consisting of white robes and fake beards.
To understand what I'm going to say, you need to understand Tartaria and Irish lore. They want you to think that the Druids created Stonehenge, because when you look into the Druids, all you will find is the ancient Hebrew Druids who practiced sacrifice, ancient Celts who were savages and had no written language, and there isn't even one solid depiction of a Druid. We aren't taught in schools about Druids. Then what the hell is a Druid? I'm not ruling out that they built it, I'm just trying to question the traditional narrative. They were the Aryan priests of the Hyperborean age, the one nation that ruled the world. What we consider Tartaria, or ancient Scythia, is just one of these nations of the world Aryan Irish Hyperborean Empire. I wouldn't really call it an empire, for this was something that we could never imagine. Now, I need to mention that these were not the only beings in this realm. It wasn't just the Aryans. Okay, so these Hyperboreans were the ancient Irish, or the Tuatha De Danann, and the Cimmerians are the Fomorian race. Look into Pindar. The Tuatha De Danann were an ancient race with blonde red hair, blue-green eyes, who were said to be quite large. The Fomorians were also a supernatural race of giants that had mastered psychic abilities and came from below the earth. In Irish legends we hear of many invasions into the motherland. The Fomorian legends are what I perceive to be ancient Cimmerians, or ancient Moors. See, the thing about calling them Moors is that it doesn't really do them justice. I have a video explaining on how these two god races exchanged knowledge, interbred, and created all the races that we know today. The Moors were from Lemuria, or Mu, and they came to Ireland. Okay, some of you will think I am just reaching out, huh? Okay, let's look into Stonehenge on Wikipedia. 2 myths that clearly hint to the answer.
A folktale relates the origin of the Fire Heels reference. The devil bought the stones from a woman in Ireland, wrapped them up, and brought them to Salisbury Plain. One of the stones fell into the Avon, and the rest were carried into the plain. The devil then cried out, "No one will ever find out how these stones came here." A friar replied, "That's what you think," whereupon the devil threw one of the stones at him and struck him on the heel. The stone stuck in the ground and is still there. According to Geoffrey, the rocks of Stonehenge were healing rocks called the Giant's Dance, which giants had brought from Africa to Ireland for their healing properties. The 5th century king Aurelius Ambrosius wished to erect a memorial to 3,000 nobles slain in the battle against the Saxons and buried at Salisbury, and at Merlin's advice, chose Stonehenge. The king sent Merlin, Uther Pendragon, King Arthur's father, and 15,000 knights to remove it from Ireland, where it had been constructed on Mount Kilorus by the giants. They slew 7,000 Irish, but as the knights tried to move the rocks with ropes and force, they failed. Then Merlin, using gear and skill, easily dismantled the stones and sent them over to Britain, where Stonehenge was dedicated. After it had been rebuilt near Amesbury, Geoffrey further narrates how Ambrosius Aurelianus, then Uther Pendragon, and finally Constantine III were buried inside the giant's rings of Stonehenge.
Isn't it interesting that one of the top tourist attractions in Salisbury is the Salisbury Cathedral? This is clear Tartarian architecture. Notice that when you see Stonehenge, you mentally attribute Stonehenge with the Druids, which gives you a very primitive perspective of them. Yet, there's a bigger mystery at hand. A mere 7 miles away sits the Salisbury Cathedral, and you think, wow, how amazing is English architecture? Mainstream history tells us that this is post-Roman times. No one visiting would even consider that maybe the two have a connection. Maybe the Druids, the ancient priests of Hyperborea, were responsible for this Tartarian architecture, which is the true representation of their sciences. Could it be like the myths of Merlin that Stonehenge is but a massive set of stones set by the Fomorians? Was it with the instruction of the Druids? I don't know. However, when you take into consideration that there's been many different renovations than the idea that they were moved, it begins to become clear that some type of cover-up is happening. The official story of Stonehenge is presented as cavemen using ropes to pull up the rocks. If the Druids but 5,000 years ago erected Stonehenge as a calculator, then this conflicts with the theory that we come from an advanced civilization such as Atlantis or Hyperborea. We know that many monuments were systematically destroyed. Well, the question is, why did they leave Stonehenge? They being the Romans. Well, perhaps it has to do with their perception of our origins. Now, for some of you, you may be wondering, what does this have to do with Christianity? Everything. For what is being unveiled is the source in which your religion sprang. It's not just Christianity. We have people that claim they know everything that there is to know about Egypt. We have biased thinking. People are not creative in the way they think anymore. Let me explain. Someone who is a Christian for 20 years will be very hesitant to look into information that leads to the idea that Christianity came from paganism. We have to stop with this if we are willing to move forward as spiritual beings. We have to look at our shadow. Quote, "The Great Pyramid in its original and dazzling splendor of light under the Egyptian sun was the object of wonderment and awe to all beholders. It surpassed in sublime grandeur any other monument or structure ever erected by man on this globe. It was considered the greatest of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Its partial destruction and defacement by removing its upper part and capstone, and by stripping it of its outer casting of white stone, which gave to it an aspect of dazzling brightness, leaving it in outward appearance bare and nude, silent and mute as to its mission, as a milestone without a figure. This has been a great loss to mankind. At noonday, its lofty golden capstone seemed to be at one with the sun, uniting earth and heaven in eternal unity, a symbolic union of spirit and matter. To mar the sublime pillar, this grand masterpiece of the Irish Magian priest of Athiest was a part of a plot as selfish as any ever conceived. This plot was put into effect by the ruling spirits at the head of the Roman Church. They cherished the ambitions of nothing less than universal rule for their church and empire. We will begin to see how this project was advanced, for it was the idea held by the leaders of the Roman Church and state, they were practically one, that all power should be centralized in the head of the church, who was also the emperor of the state, and any and all religious institutions which in any way conflicted with this ideal were to be done away with. For this reason, the mystery cults were suppressed and initiation into the ancient or esoteric mysteries were forbidden, so that no religious establishment, worship, or practice would exist which would draw and hold men to it other than the Roman state church. And besides, as the study and preparation necessary for those who were selected for initiation into the higher mysteries was such as to develop a highly philosophic and spiritual state of mind, such study and preparation did not comport with the object which church rulers had in view. Such minds would not yield adherence to a mere political and idolatrous church whose doctrines were, in the main, intended for the uninstructed multitude. Such minds could not be dominated by a political or mercenary priesthood. They were enlightened men and they stood in the way of the church project. Therefore, the institutions which produced such men were to be suppressed. Christianity has led the masses to becoming docile, and this was by intention. For all the ancient books of the past were destroyed, and as I will show, the languages were rearranged, vowels added, and then their origins suppressed. The Great Pyramid of Athiest was used as a temple of initiation for inculcating the mysteries of nature and the occult powers of the soul. The decree of the church and the execution of its policy to close the Great Pyramid Temple and suppress its institution practically put an end to the development of the enlightened minds in the Nile Valley. Now, I'm not saying that the Great Pyramid was created by white people. I'm saying it was created under the Church of Athiest, which, yes, is the Aryan race. However, if you wish to understand more of my perspective, I have a video on the Moors. The Aryan race, the Church of Athiest, the Hyperborean race, mixed with many different cultures by exchanging knowledge. This is why we see so many similarities in religion and architecture from all around the world. The fingerprint is everywhere. especially in the Bible. Quote, however, the whole controversy served to arouse an intensified interest, such as been awakened among scholars and thinkers everywhere in the Great Pyramid. This companion piece of the Bible, the one art, the other in literature, the Bible is the word in script, the Great Pyramid is the word in stone, and both came from the same source, the Irish Magian priesthood of Iessa. It was always known and in the possession of the ruling spirits of the Church in Rome and the high priest of the Church of England. The success of the former institution was dependent upon the suppression of this knowledge. But it was, and is up to this day, also one of the most jealously guarded secrets of the High Church of England. Otherwise, this knowledge could not be widely known, as the evidence is so plain that it is only through a studied and agreed upon silence that the facts have been kept from becoming common knowledge. The Great Pyramid, and the group of which it is the premier, together with the temples of the Nile Valley, are the most convincing witnesses and testimonials, offering no chance for contradiction or uncertainty as to the accomplishments and genius of the Irish, or as it is called in history, the Aryan race. There is no mistaking the monuments left by the Irish, who were once the rulers and masters of the whole earth. Their rule embraced all countries, it was worldwide. Ireland was the first mistress of the seas. It was the first and only worldwide empire which has ever been known, for it was spiritual. It was greater in extent than Persian, Greek, Roman, or Mogul ever attained to. The remains of their works, which, wherever they're found, bear an unmistakable similarity in shape and character. They are huge, immense, and conceived and carried out on a plan so extensive that it awes the mind of the man of today. These remains extend from Ireland along the Atlantic coast of Europe to Africa, along the Mediterranean Sea to Egypt, India, China, Java, Tahiti, and the Caroline Islands in the South Pacific Ocean. On the American continent, we find the Route Tower near Newport, RI, which bespeaks its Irish origin, and the great pyramidal mounds of the Ohio and Mississippi valleys. Also, the ruined temples of the Yucatan and Mexico, and similar remains of South America are all evidence of their handiwork. All owe their origin to the same source, and they establish beyond any doubt that the Irish were the first real discoverers of America, and that the very name of God among the Indians of our country was an Irish name derived from those missionaries and explorers centuries before Christopher Columbus or Eric the Red were born. One of the Irish names of God was Man, and Manitha is the Irish word for holy. The Indian name for God was Manitau, the Holy One. The Indians also had another name for God, and this again was Irish. It was Manabasha, the sun god. It is a compound word with the root word man, holy, and basha, of the cows, the bull, virtually the same as Baal, the Irish sun god. So the name signifies the holy life giver, or holy creator. Anyone who knows the Celtic tongue will recognize this fact at once, and so will all competent students of philology. No one after reading this treatise on the Great Pyramid will ever have a doubt as to who its authors were, or as to whether the high personages in England, who always have assumed direction of the ship of state, have had a knowledge of who the builders of the Great Pyramid were. Nor will there be any doubt but that the ruling spirits of the Church of Rome have had this knowledge, and that they still keep it a close secret. This is from Connor McDarry's Irish Wisdom Preserved in Bible and Pyramids. This book alone will show you so much that you probably are unaware of. There's also no way you can say, oh, Luciferian media, as the passion and intention of this book are very clear. Okay, I may have went really far out there for some people. I know that this is a completely different worldview, so let's forget about all that for now. I want to show you some research that shows quite clearly the affinity between ancient languages. There is so much confusion in academic circles when it comes to which language is the predecessor. For example, Phoenician is said to be an Egyptian derivation, when this is not the case. Remember, quote, to this country the Greeks apply the term ogia, a term which was never given but to the very ancient, and it is from the Irish, ancient Druids, that the Greeks trace their descent. From Celtic Druids, Godfrey Higgins, quote, it is the object of the author in the following work to show that the Druids of the British Isles were the priests of a very ancient nation called Celtae. That these Celtae were a colony from the first race of people, a learned and enlightened people, the descendants of the persons who escaped the effects of the deluge on the borders of the Caspian Sea. That they were the earliest occupiers of Greece, Italy, France, and Britain, arriving in those places by a route nearly along the 45th parallel of north latitude. That, in a similar manner, colonies advanced from the great nation by a southern line through Asia, peopling Syria and Africa, and arriving at last by sea through the Pillars of Hercules at Britain. In the course of the work, the mode in which the ancient patriarchal religions, as well as those of Greece and Italy, were founded, will be pointed out, and the author flatters himself that he shall have much strength in the foundations of rational Christianity. He will show that all the languages of the Western world were the same, and that one system of letters, that of the ancient Irish Druids, pervaded the whole, was common to the British Isles and Gaul, to the inhabitants of Italy, Greece, Syria, Arabia, Persia, and Hindustan, and that one of the two alphabets of the same system in which the ancient Irish manuscripts are written, namely the Beth Lewis Neon, came by Gaul through Britain to Ireland, and that the other, the Boboloth, came through the Straits of Gibraltar. This is the story of Odysseus. This is also the story of the ancient Druids. After the cataclysm, they ventured out around the world and then returned back to Ireland. Consider the giants in the Odyssey. They could have been the Fomorians, or a mixed giant race. We don't think of the Druids sailing around the world because that is mostly credited to the Phoenicians.
The Phoenicians were indeed extraordinarily gifted men. They were one of the first races to devise and employ a sophisticated alphabet, construct great cities and temples, make paper for writing, and sail the seas of the world. The fact is that they were Arya, or adepts of the highest order. They were master architects, astrologers, shipwrights, mariners, healers, and scientists. We believe the Phoenicians were, like the Scythians, originally from the West. They preserved the secrets of megalithic construction and many other ancient arts. They may have been the original builders of many temples along the Nile. This is what the Old Testament hints, and what a great deal of miscellaneous Masonic literature suggests. Michael Tartarian, Irish Origins of Civilization, Volume 2.
Okay, if you've seen my other videos, I go more in depth on Plato's Timaeus, but in the story, Solon wants to learn more about ancient antiquity from the priest of Egypt. Solon is trying to impress the priest with his understanding of myth and its connection with ancient history. Solon was of the perception that the origins of the Greeks lie in the East, in Asia, in ancient Argos, but no, the priest of Egypt stated,
"You Hellenes are children. In mind you are all young. There is no old opinion handed down among you by ancient tradition, nor any science which is hoary with age. In the first place, you remember a single deluge only, but there were many previous ones. In the next place, you do not know that there dwelt formerly in your land the fairest and noblest race of men which ever lived, and that you and your whole city are descended from a small seed or remnant of them which survived. And this was unknown to you because for many generations the survivors of that destruction died, leaving no written word."
This noble race of men is what Godfrey Higgins refers to as the Celtae. This is why we have no written alphabet of these ancient advanced peoples. The Phoenicians were obviously the most advanced after the most recent cataclysm. The Greeks stole everything. Does that sound like an overstatement? They were confused, lost, they came into these cities that were empty and desolate. They rewrote everything, changed the language, rewrote history. It's not just the Greeks. We can focus on three main groups: the Hebrews, the Greeks, and the Romans. I'm trying to do everything that I can to tie all this together with the Tartarian perspective, but we will have to be patient until everything can be looked at collectively. I know it's been a while since we last posted, but we wanted to put our effort towards this ignored Christian origin series, and it became a little overwhelming. We have a lot more to say, but we decided to make this a 4-part series. Most of it's already done. This first chapter is primarily focused on the Druids, but it's unfinished in that part 1 and part 2 are actually just one chapter on the Irish. Keep in tune for next week on part 2, where we will go over more proof that the Bible is in fact Irish in origin.
Let go of everything you think to be true. Relax the mind and ask the question, do I truly understand what this reality is?